The day I brought my newborn home from the hospital, I thought I was finally coming back to the only place that had ever felt like home. Instead, my own mother looked me in the eyes, pointed at the front door, and said 5 words that changed my life forever. Make room for your brother's family. As I stood there bleeding from childbirth, holding a 3-day-old baby in my arms while my diaper bag rested beside my feet. Then she added something I'll never forget. You're a grown woman. Figure it out. I thought I'd lost everything. What I didn't know was that 72 hours later, a lawyer would walk into that same house carrying one envelope. Inside was a deed. And by sunset, the people who threw me and my newborn onto the street were the ones begging for a place to sleep, because the house was never really my mother's and she had absolutely no idea. If you've ever been treated like the disposable child while someone else became the golden child, this story is for you. My name is Emma Carter. I'm 31 years old, and until that week, I believed family meant forever. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, in a quiet neighborhood where everyone knew each other's names. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family. Inside, we were anything but. My older brother, Tyler, was my mother's entire world. If Tyler broke something, I was blamed. If Tyler failed a class, it was because his teachers were unfair. If Tyler wanted money, Mom somehow found it. When I earned straight A's, she'd simply say, "That's what you're supposed to do." After a while, I stopped trying to impress her. Some children chase love. Eventually, others learn to survive without it. I became one of those children. My father was different. David Carter was gentle. Past, the kind of man who remembered birthdays, packed lunches, and never missed a school play. He used to tell me something every Sunday morning while making pancakes. Emma, your worth isn't decided by who appreciates you. At 12 years old, I didn't understand those words. At 31, they saved my life. When Dad died from pancreatic cancer 5 years earlier, everything changed. Mom transformed almost overnight. She sold his truck, donated his clothes before I could keep any, removed every photo of him from the living room. It was like she wanted to erase the only person who had ever balanced the family. Then Tyler moved back home with his wife, Brittany, and their 2 kids. Neither of them kept a steady job. They always had excuses. The economy, stress, bad bosses. Meanwhile, Mom paid every bill. She even refinanced the house to help Tyler get back on his feet. Those feet never seemed to move. After Dad died, I stayed away more often. I worked as a pediatric nurse, long shifts, long nights. Long enough to convince myself distance could heal old wounds. Then I met Noah. He was kind. Funny save. For the first time, someone loved me without making me earn it. We married 18 months later. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Until one rainy November evening, everything changed again. Noah was driving home from work when a drunk driver crossed the center line. He never made it home. I became a widow at 29, pregnant, and completely alone. The insurance barely covered funeral expenses. Our apartment lease expired 2 months later. With nowhere else to go, Mom offered me Dad's old bedroom. I suppose you can stay until the baby's born. Not welcome home. Not I'm here for you. Just, I suppose. I accepted anyway. Sometimes survival requires swallowing your pride. For 7 months, I ignored Brittany's passive-aggressive comments, ignored Tyler eating food I bought, ignored Mom reminding everyone that I was temporary. I focused on my baby, that tiny heartbeat growing inside me, because she was the only future I had left. Her name would be Lily. After 16 exhausting hours of labor, she finally arrived. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, perfect. Holding her for the first time healed pieces of me I thought were gone forever. The hospital discharged us 3 days later. I texted Mom. "We're coming home," she replied with one word. Okay. I should have recognized the warning hidden inside that single word. When we pulled into the driveway, something felt wrong. Tyler's truck, a moving van, boxes everywhere. I carried Lily toward the front door. Mom opened it before I knocked. She wasn't smiling. Instead, she folded her arms. "Don't unpack." I blinked. "What?" She sighed dramatically. Tyler and Brittany need more space. The kids are sharing a room. I stared at her. I'm confused. You'll have to leave. I honestly laughed. I thought she was joking. Then I saw Brittany standing behind her, smirking. I'm sorry? Mom's voice hardened. Make room for your brother's family. I looked down at Lily sleeping peacefully against my chest. Mom, I literally just gave birth. You'll figure something out. I have nowhere to go. That's not my responsibility. I couldn't breathe. This was Dad's room. This is my house. No, my voice cracked. This was Dad's house. The temperature changed instantly. Her eyes narrowed. Don't start. Tyler finally walked outside. Emma, don't make this dramatic. I looked at him. Dramatic? I have a newborn. He shrugged. My kids need stability too. I laughed through tears. So does mine. Brittany crossed her arms. You can't expect everyone to rearrange their lives because you had a baby. I felt something inside me break. Not loudly, quickly. Like ice cracking beneath someone's feet, Mom handed me a garbage bag. We packed your things. My clothes, Dad's photo, Lily's tiny blankets, thrown into trash bags, like I was garbage too. She stepped aside. The room's already painted for Tyler's boys. I looked one last time toward Dad's old bedroom, blue walls, new bunk beds, every trace of him. Gone, every trace of me, erased. I didn't scream, I didn't beg, I simply whispered, I hope you never need me. Mom answered without hesitation. We won't. She closed the door, right in my face, with my newborn still sleeping in my arms. And that was the biggest mistake she'd ever make. Emma stared at the closed door for several seconds, not because she expected it to open again, because her mind simply refused to believe what had just happened. The cold November wind brushed across Lily's tiny face, and she instinctively pulled the blanket tighter around her daughter. Not here, she whispered to herself. Don't fall apart here. The driveway, where she had played hopscotch as a little girl, suddenly felt like a stranger's property. Inside the house, she heard laughter. Tyler's children were running through the hallway. Someone turned on music. Boxes scraped across the hardwood floors. Life inside continued as if she had never existed. Emma picked up the 2 black garbage bags containing everything she owned. One bag split open halfway to her car. Lily's baby clothes spilled across the wet driveway. Tiny pink socks. A stuffed rabbit Noah had bought the week before he died. The framed photograph of Emma and her father shattered against the concrete. She knelt down, still holding Lily with one arm, gathering everything together with trembling fingers. The picture frame had broken, but the photograph itself survived. Her father's smiling face stared back at her. She remembered something he once said after Tyler had blamed her for breaking a window. One day, he'd whispered while helping her clean up the glass, "The truth always has a way of finding daylight." At the time, she thought he was talking about childhood mistakes. Now, she wondered if he'd been talking about something much bigger. Emma drove aimlessly for nearly an hour. Every hotel she checked was beyond what she could afford. Her bank account held just over $800. The funeral, the medical bills, the unpaid maternity leave, everything had drained her savings. She pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour grocery store. Lily began crying. Emma looked at her daughter and finally allowed herself to cry too. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "You deserved a better family than this." A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. She looked up. An elderly woman stood beside the driver's window, gray hair, kenned eyes, a grocery bag in one hand. Emma cautiously rolled the window down. "I hope I'm not bothering you," the woman said gently. "I noticed you've been sitting here for a while." Emma quickly wiped away her tears. "I'm okay." The woman smiled sadly. "No, sweetheart, you aren't." Something about the woman's voice sounded like warmth, the kind Emma hadn't felt in years. "My name is Margaret." Emma hesitated. "I'm Emma." Margaret looked toward the sleeping baby. Beautiful little girl. Lily. Margaret nodded. "I lost my husband 15 years ago." Emma looked up. "I know that look. The world has just collapsed underneath your feet." Those words broke the last piece of Emma's composure. Within minutes, she found herself telling a complete stranger everything: her husband's accident, the pregnancy, her mother's rejection, being thrown out. Margaret listened without interrupting once. When Emma finished, the older woman simply reached into her purse. She handed Emma a business card. "My son owns a small apartment building. It's nothing fancy, but one unit became available yesterday." Emma immediately shook her head. "I can't afford first month's rent and a deposit." Margaret smiled. "I didn't ask if you could. I asked if you needed help." Emma stared at the card. She hadn't accepted charity from anyone before, but this wasn't charity. This was kindness. Something completely different. That evening, Emma and Lily slept in a tiny one-bedroom apartment. The furniture was old, the refrigerator hummed loudly, the carpet had seen better days. But it was warm, safe, and no one could tell them to leave. After putting Lily into her borrowed crib, Emma sat quietly by the window. Her phone buzzed, a message from Tyler. "Don't make Mom feel guilty. She did what she had to do." Emma stared at the text for several moments. Then she deleted it without replying. Another message arrived, this time from Brittany. "I hope you understand this was best for everyone." Delete then. Her mother. "You left some boxes in the garage. Pick them up this week." No apology, no concern, nothing about her granddaughter. Emma turned the phone completely off. Some conversations no longer deserved answers. The following Monday, Emma visited the law office that had handled her father's estate years earlier. Not because she expected anything. She simply wanted copies of a few documents for insurance purposes. The receptionist recognized her immediately. "Emma?" She smiled warmly. "I'm so sorry about your father. Mr. Harrison isn't here today, but his partner is." A few minutes later, attorney Michael Reynolds walked into the waiting room. He looked surprised. "Emma, I've actually been trying to reach you." She frowned. "Me?" "Yes," he motioned toward his office. "Please." Once they sat down, he opened a thick file cabinet, pulled out a worn manila folder, then looked directly at her. "Has your mother mentioned anything about your father's final instructions?" Emma shook her head. "No. Why?" He slowly removed a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. Across the front, written in her father's unmistakable handwriting, were 6 words. "For Emma." When the time's right, Emma's heart stopped. "I've never seen that," Mr. Reynolds sighed. "Your father instructed us not to release this unless certain conditions were met." "What conditions?" He adjusted his glasses. "If you were ever forced out of the family home, or treated as though you no longer belonged there." Emma felt every hair on her arms stand up. "What are you saying?" The attorney looked at her with quiet sympathy. "I'm saying your father planned for something he prayed would never happen." Slowly, he slid the envelope across the desk. Emma's hands trembled as she picked it up. She recognized every curve of her father's handwriting. It felt like hearing his voice after 5 years of silence. Inside, there was a handwritten letter, and beneath it, a folded legal document bearing the county seal. Mr. Reynolds watched her expression carefully. "Emma, I think you should read your father's letter first." Emma unfolded the first page. The very first sentence made the air leave her lungs. "If you're reading this, then your mother has finally chosen Tyler over you one last time." Pridgeon, and with those words, Emma realized her father had known the truth long before anyone else. He hadn't just left her a letter, he had left her a plan. Emma's vision blurred before she even reached the second line. Tears rolled silently onto the paper. It felt impossible. 5 years after his death, her father was speaking directly to her. She took a shaky breath and continued reading. "My sweet Emma, if you're reading this, it means the one thing I prayed would never happen happened anyway. It means you've been pushed aside for Tyler once again. If that's true, then I need you to know something before anyone else tells you their version of the story. None of this is your fault. It never was." Emma covered her mouth. Those 6 words healed a wound she'd carried since childhood. None of this is your fault. Her father had seen it. All of it. The favoritism, the manipulation, the loneliness. She kept reading. Your mother loves Tyler differently than she loves you. I spent years hoping she'd change. She never did. I stayed because I believed my presence protected you. If I'm gone, I fear no one will." Emma couldn't stop crying. Mr. Reynolds quietly placed a box of tissues on the desk without saying a word. The letter continued. "There is something your mother never knew. She believed the house belonged to both of us equally. It didn't." Emma frowned. She looked at the attorney. He gave a small nod. "Keep reading. The house originally belonged to your grandfather. When he passed away, he left it only to me. Before I became sick, I transferred the property into the Carter Family Trust, not because I didn't trust your mother, but because I knew grief changes people, and I couldn't risk losing the home your grandfather built." Emma's heart began racing. The folded legal document suddenly felt much heavier. She unfolded it. Across the top were the words, "Carter Family Trust," below that primary trustee, David Carter successor trustee. Emma Carter. Emma blinked, then blinked again. She looked at Mr. Reynolds. "This can't be right." "It is." "My mother said Dad left her everything." Mr. Reynolds slowly folded his hands. "He left her his retirement accounts, his life insurance, his investments, but not the house." Emma stared at him. "She never owned it?" "No. Legally, she only had the right to live there for as long as she followed the trust's conditions." Emma looked back at the document. There was another page. Helted, Mr. Reynolds slid it closer. "I think you should read Clause 7. Emma did. Every word felt unreal. "The life occupancy granted to Margaret Carter shall immediately terminate if she permanently removes or excludes my daughter, Emma Carter, from residing in the family home during a period of financial hardship, medical recovery, widowhood, or while caring for a minor child." Emma stopped breathing. She read it again, then a third time. There it was, in black ink, signed "Witnessed," notarized. Her father had anticipated this exact moment. Even the wording matched: medical recovery, widowhood, minor child. It was as if he had seen the future, she whispered. He knew. Mr. Reynolds nodded slowly. He didn't know it would happen, but he knew it could. Emma looked at the final sentence. "Upon violation of this condition, all occupancy rights immediately transfer to successor trustee Emma Carter, who shall have sole authority over possession, management, or sale of the property." Silence filled the office. Emma looked up. "So," Mr. Reynolds answered calmly, "as of the moment your mother ordered you out, she forfeited her legal right to remain in that house." Emma's eyes widened. "What about Tyler? He has no legal rights at all. Brittany? The children? They are innocent, but legally, they cannot stay there without your permission." Emma leaned back in disbelief. For years, she had believed she was powerless. In reality, her father had quietly placed the power in her hands years ago. She simply never knew it existed. Mr. Reynolds opened another folder. "I should also tell you something else." Emma looked up. "Your father instructed us not to contact you unless the trust conditions were violated. So you've known all this?" "Yes," he specifically said. "If Emma is ever thrown away by her own family, tell her she was never the one who lost her home. They lost the privilege of living in it." Emma completely broke down, not because of the house, because for the first time in her life, someone had chosen her first. Even after death, her father had protected her. After several minutes, Mr. Reynolds spoke again. "I've already prepared the paperwork." Emma looked confused. "What paperwork?" "The notice of termination. The deed transfer has already been recorded. The county updated ownership this morning." Emma stared at him. "This morning?" "The trust activated automatically." He slid another document across the desk. Official county seal. Recounted, stamped, owner. Emma Carter, trustee of the Carter Family Trust. Her hands shook. She wasn't dreaming. The house was legally hers. Every room, every wall, every brick, including the bedroom where Tyler's children were probably unpacking their toys at that very moment. Mr. Reynolds stood. "If you'd like, I can have a process server deliver the notice today." Emma remained silent. She wasn't thinking about revenge. She was thinking about Lily. About safeties, about stability, about her father's final gift. Finally, she asked, "How long do they have, legally?" 30 days. He paused. But considering they obtained possession by excluding the lawful trustee, he looked directly into her eyes. "The judge can authorize immediate removal." Emma slowly nodded. For years, she had begged for a place in that family. She wasn't going to beg anymore. She quietly picked up a pen, signed the authorization, then looked at Mr. Reynolds. "Have the papers delivered?" He nodded. "I'll personally see that it's done." Emma stood to leave. As she reached the office door, Mr. Reynolds smiled gently. "Your father left one final instruction." She turned. "What was it?" The attorney smiled. "He said, if my daughter ever has to choose between revenge and dignity, remind her that dignity is the revenge people never recover from." Emma smiled through her tears. She wasn't going back to scream. She wasn't going back to insult anyone. She was simply going back as the legal owner of the house they had thrown her out of. And before the sun set that day, a process server would knock on the front door, the same front door that had been slammed in her face. Only this time, the people inside would be the ones whose world was about to collapse. The process server arrived at exactly 3:17 p.m. A black sedan pulled into the driveway. A man in a gray suit stepped out, carrying a leather briefcase. Inside the house, Tyler was helping Brittany hang family photos on the living room wall. Photos that had already replaced every picture of Emma. The doorbell rang. Brittany glanced through the window. "Who is that?" Tyler shrugged. "No idea." He opened the front door. "Can I help you?" "Tyler Matthews?" "Yeah. I have legal documents regarding the property located at this address." Tyler frowned. "What property?" "The residence you're currently occupying." Before Tyler could respond, the process server handed him a thick envelope. "These papers require your immediate attention." Tyler looked irritated. "This has to be a mistake." "It isn't." The process server turned toward the driveway. "Oh, one more thing." He handed Tyler a second envelope. "This one is for Margaret Carter." Their mother walked into the hallway. "Who's at the door?" Tyler looked confused. "Some lawyer." "It's not a lawyer," the man replied calmly. "I'm a court-authorized process server. The documents speak for themselves." He walked back to his car without another word. The front door closed. Silence filled the house. Margaret adjusted her glasses. "What is all this nonsense?" Tyler tore open his envelope. His face lost all color. "What?" Brittany asked. He couldn't answer. His hands were shaking. Margaret grabbed her own envelope. She unfolded the first page. The bold headline immediately caught her eye. "Notice of termination of life. Occupancy. What is this?" She flipped to the next page, then another. Her breathing became uneven. This isn't possible." Tyler finally found his voice. "It says," he swallowed hard, "it says Emma owns the house." Brittany laughed. "No, seriously. I'm serious." She snatched the papers away. 5 seconds later, her smile disappeared. "What kind of joke is this?" Margaret hurried to the kitchen table. She read every page, then read them again. Clause 7, the trust. David Carter, successor trustee. "Emma Carter," she whispered. "No, no, no!" Tyler slammed the papers onto the table. "Dad would never do this." Margaret's voice cracked. "He couldn't have." Then she reached the final page. His signature, David's unmistakable signature, witnessed, notarized, remogded real. Her knees nearly gave out. For the first time in years, she remembered a conversation she'd dismissed shortly before David died. He had been sitting on the porch, weak, barely able to stand. He had looked at her and quietly said, "Promise me something." She had sighed impatiently. "What? If Emma ever needs this house, don't make her fight for it." She had rolled her eyes. "Why would I?" David had simply nodded. "I hope you're right." She hadn't thought about those words since. Now, they echoed through her mind like thunder. Meanwhile, Emma was sitting quietly in her apartment, rocking Lily to sleep. Her phone rang. Mr. Reynolds. "It's done." She looked down at her daughter. How did they react? There was a brief pause. "I've handled estate disputes for 28 years. I've seen anger. I've seen denial. I've seen families fall apart. But today, I saw 3 people realize they had mistaken kindness for weakness. Emma closed her eyes. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt peaceful. For the first time since Noah died, she wasn't afraid anymore. Back at the house, panic spread quickly. Tyler paced across the living room. This has to be challenged. We'll sue. We'll fight. Margaret called the attorney who had represented her years earlier. Voicemail. She called another, then another. Finally, one returned her call. After reviewing the documents electronically, the attorney asked one question. Mrs. Carter, did you ask Emma to leave? Margaret hesitated. Yes. Was she recovering from childbirth? Yes. Was she widowed? Yes. Was she caring for her newborn? Yes. There was a long silence. Finally, the attorney spoke. I'm afraid the trust language is exceptionally specific. I don't see a legal path around it. Margaret whispered. So, what happens now? You negotiate. If Ms. Carter is willing, and if she isn't, you prepare to move. The call ended for the first time in decades. Margaret realized there was no one left to blame. That evening, a black SUV stopped outside Emma's apartment. Margaret climbed out alone. She stood at the apartment door for nearly a minute before knocking. Emma opened it. Neither woman spoke. Margaret looked exhausted, older than she had just days before. She glanced toward the sleeping baby. May I come in? Emma considered the request, then stepped aside. Margaret looked around the tiny apartment, one couch, one crib, secondhand furniture, a folding table serving as a dining room. She lowered her head. You've been living here? Emma nodded. Yes! There was another silence. Finally, Margaret spoke. I didn't know. Emma looked at her steadily. You never asked. Those 4 words landed harder than any insult. Margaret swallowed. I made a mistake. Emma didn't respond. I thought Tyler needed the house more. Emma's expression remained calm. You didn't choose the house. You chose him. Again, Margaret's eyes filled with tears. I was wrong. Emma quietly asked. Were you wrong when I was 10? When Tyler broke my science project? Were you wrong when Dad bought me a bicycle and you gave it to Tyler because he wanted it? Margaret looked down. Emma continued. Were you wrong when Noah died and you told me I needed to stop crying because it made everyone uncomfortable? Each memory struck like another wave. Margaret couldn't answer because she remembered every one of them. She had simply never believed they mattered, until now. Emma looked toward Lily. My daughter will never wonder whether she's loved. I'll make sure of that. Margaret finally whispered. What do you want from me? Emma looked directly into her mother's eyes. I wanted a mother. The room fell silent. And now? Margaret asked softly. Emma took a slow breath. Now, I just want peace. Margaret nodded. For the first time in her life, she understood that some apologies arrive years too late. She quietly stood. I'll leave. As she reached the door, Emma spoke one last sentence. The house wasn't what hurt me. You made me believe I wasn't worth protecting. Margaret froze. Without another word, she walked out, closing the apartment door behind her. Outside, she sat in her car and cried harder than she had at her husband's funeral, because David had been right. She hadn't lost a house. She had lost her daughter, and unlike the house, there was no legal document that could bring her back. For the next 3 days, the house was unusually quiet. No laughter, no family dinners, no plans for the holidays. Instead, there were cardboard boxes, phone calls to attorneys, arguments behind closed doors, and one question no one could answer. Where are we going to live? Tyler refused to believe it was over. There has to be a loophole. There always is. He spent thousands of dollars consulting lawyers across Ohio. Every meeting ended the same way. One attorney finally closed the file and said bluntly, Your father anticipated this exact situation. The trust is one of the strongest I've ever reviewed. You aren't fighting Emma. You're fighting David's final wishes. Tyler walked out without another word. Across town, Emma wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. She was thinking about diapers, formula, doctor appointments, the ordinary things new mothers worry about. Every evening, she rocked Lily to sleep beside the window. Sometimes she imagined Noah standing there beside them, smiling. He would have loved this little girl. He would have called her his miracle. One afternoon, there was another knock at her apartment. This time, it was someone she never expected, Mrs. Evelyn Brooks, the elderly woman who had lived next door to the Carter family for over 30 years. Emma opened the door in surprise. "Mrs. Brooks!" The 80-year-old smiled warmly. "I've been looking for you." She carried a small wooden box. "I think this belongs to you." Emma invited her inside. Mrs. Brooks carefully placed the box on the table. "I promised your father I wouldn't give this to anyone except you." Emma's heart skipped. "You knew?" Mrs. Brooks nodded. "The week before he passed, he asked me to keep this safe." Emma slowly opened the box. Inside were dozens of photographs, family vacations, birthday parties, school graduations, every picture her mother had removed from the house. Her father had secretly made copies. Beneath them was a small velvet pouch. Emma untied it. Inside lay her grandmother's wedding ring. Mrs. Brooks smiled. "Your father said, one day Emma will build the family she deserved." Emma held the ring tightly as tears streamed down her cheeks. Then Mrs. Brooks handed her one final envelope. On the front were the words, "Open after you forgive yourself." Emma looked confused. "I don't understand." Mrs. Brooks smiled gently. "Your father said you'd spend years believing you weren't enough. He wanted you to read that only after you realized you always were." Meanwhile, the 30-day deadline was approaching. Tyler became desperate. He convinced Brittany they should confront Emma together. "This is ridiculous." "She's being vindictive," Mom apologized. "That should be enough." Margaret remained silent. Deep down, she knew it wasn't enough, not after 31 years. Still, she climbed into the car with them. When they arrived at Emma's apartment, Tyler pounded on the door. Emma answered calmly. Lily rested peacefully against her shoulder. Tyler didn't even say hello. "You've made your point." Emma waited. "It's time to give the house back." Emma looked at him for several seconds, then quietly asked, "Back? You never owned it." Tyler frowned. "You know what I mean." "No, I really don't." Brittany stepped forward. "The kids love that house." Emma nodded. "So did I." "You can't punish innocent children." Emma looked at Tyler. "I was an innocent child, too." Silence. "You watched Mom choose you every single time. You never once said, 'That's not fair.'" Tyler opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Emma continued. "When Noah died, you didn't come to the funeral. You sent flowers." "You couldn't spare 2 hours." Tyler lowered his eyes. "I was busy." Emma smiled sadly. "Exactly. You were always busy when it came to me." Margaret quietly whispered Emma. Emma turned toward her. "I've spent my entire life accepting less because I thought that's all I deserved." She looked down at Lily. "My daughter will never learn that lesson." Tyler crossed his arms. "So what? We're homeless?" Emma answered calmly. "No, you're adults. You'll do exactly what you expected me to do. Figure it out." The words hit Tyler like a punch because they were his own. The same words he'd spoken while she stood outside holding her newborn. No one had forgotten, least of all Emma. Margaret began crying. "I failed you." Emma nodded. "Yes, I did." For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, Emma reached into a folder beside the door. She pulled out a single sheet of paper. "I've already signed a lease agreement." Tyler frowned. "For what?" Emma handed it to him. "The house." His eyes widened. She wasn't selling it. She wasn't moving back. Instead, she had arranged for the home to become a transitional residence for young widows with children, women recovering from childbirth, domestic cases, or sudden loss. The first family would move in within 2 weeks. Emma looked at the house plans attached to the lease. "My father wanted that house to protect people. I'm making sure it does." Tyler stared at the papers in disbelief. "You'd rather give it to strangers than your own family?" Emma answered softly. "No, I'd rather give it to people who know what it feels like to have nowhere to go." Margaret covered her mouth. She finally understood. Emma wasn't taking revenge. She was ending a cycle, the very pain that had almost broken her. would now become someone else's shelter. Tyler slowly lowered the papers. For the first time in his life, he realized that he hadn't just lost a house, he had lost a sister who would have done anything for him, and he had traded that relationship for a bedroom. Emma kissed Lily's forehead and smiled. My father once told me something. Home isn't the place that keeps you warm. It's the people who refuse to let you stand alone in the cold. She looked at her mother one last time. You had that chance. Then she gently closed the apartment door, not with anger, not with satisfaction, but with peace. On the other side of that door, a broken family stood in silence. Inside, a mother held her daughter close. For the first time in years, Emma wasn't mourning what she'd lost. She was celebrating what she had finally found, a future built not on favoritism, but on love, dignity, and the promise that Lily would never have to wonder if she belonged. That was the inheritance David Carter had truly left behind. Not a house, a legacy months past. Spring slowly replaced the bitter Ohio winter. The old Carter house no longer looked the same. The faded blue shutters had been repainted. Fresh flowers lined the walkway. A new wooden sign stood near the front porch. The Lily House, a safe place for mothers and children. Emma stood across the street, holding Lily, who was now almost 1 year old. She smiled. Her father would have loved it. The house that had once witnessed years of favoritism now echoed with babies laughing, children playing, young mothers cooking dinner together. No one was ever told they were a burden. No one was ever asked to leave. Every woman who walked through that front door heard the same words. You're safe now. Those words healed people. Including Emma, the local newspaper published a story about Lily House. Within days, television stations picked it up, then national news. People across America donated furniture, cribs, books, baby clothes. Volunteers offered free childcare. Doctors donated medical care. Law firms offered legal assistance to struggling mothers. The waiting list grew longer every week. Emma never expected any of it. She simply wanted one mother to avoid experiencing what she had. Instead, thousands found hope. One Saturday afternoon, a black SUV pulled into the parking lot. Emma recognized it immediately, Margaret. She stepped out slowly. She looked smaller than Emma remembered. Older, much older. She carried no gifts, no flowers, only a small cardboard box. Emma walked outside. What brings you here? Margaret looked at the sign. I wanted to see what you built. Emma remained quiet. Margaret handed her the box. I've been cleaning. I found these in the attic. Emma opened it. Inside were dozens of things she'd believed were gone forever. Her first ballet shoes, her elementary school medals, Father's Day cards she'd made for David, a tiny stuffed bear from childhood, and a worn notebook. Emma immediately recognized it. It was her father's journal. Her hands trembled. I thought this disappeared. Margaret looked down. I hid it. Emma slowly lifted her eyes. You hid it? Margaret nodded through tears. I couldn't bear reading how much he loved you. Emma said nothing. I was jealous. The words shocked even Margaret herself. I was jealous of my own daughter. Silence settled between them. Margaret continued. David saw everything in you. He admired your kindness, your strength, your heart. I kept wondering, why didn't he look at me that way anymore? She wiped away tears. So instead of becoming better, I became bitter. Emma listened quietly, no excuses, no blame. For the first time, her mother was telling the truth. Margaret took a deep breath. I've started therapy. I volunteer at a food pantry. I sold most of my jewelry. I donated the money. Emma nodded politely. I'm glad. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. I finally understand what I did. Emma looked toward Lily House. Children were chasing bubbles across the lawn. One young mother rocked her newborn on the porch. I spent 31 years trying to earn your love, Emma said softly. I don't need to anymore. Margaret smiled sadly. I know. Then she reached into her purse. I have one last thing. She handed Emma an envelope. My will, Emma frowned. I've changed everything. The little I have left, I'm leaving it to Lily House. Emma looked surprised. Margaret smiled faintly. I can't change your childhood, but maybe I can help protect someone else's. Emma looked at her mother for a long time, finally. She stepped forward, not for a hug, not yet, but she gently squeezed Margaret's hand. It lasted only a few seconds. For Margaret, it felt like receiving a second chance she never thought possible. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep, Emma finally opened David's journal. Inside were years of handwritten entries. One page caught her attention immediately. The date was exactly 1 month before he passed away. She began reading. "If you're reading this, Emma, then life probably became harder after I left. I'm sorry I couldn't stay longer. There are 1,000 things I wanted to teach Lily someday. Yes, I know you'll have a daughter call it a father's instinct." Emma laughed through her tears. The next line broke her heart. If Margaret ever realizes what she lost, don't hate her forever. People who live without love and eventually stop recognizing it when it's standing in front of them. Emma closed the journal. She sat quietly for a long time. Then she whispered, "I miss you, Dad." Outside, the porch light of Lily House glowed softly. A young mother stepped onto the porch carrying her baby. She looked frightened, exhausted, lost. Emma smiled, walked outside, and said the words she had once needed to hear herself. "Welcome home." The young woman burst into tears because sometimes healing doesn't come from getting revenge. It comes from becoming the person you desperately needed when your own world fell apart. David Carter had left Emma a house. Emma turned it into hope, and hope always outlives pain. The courtroom was silent, not because the judge hadn't spoken, but because everyone was staring at the woman they had once thrown out of her own home. Emma stood quietly with Lily in her arms. No expensive suit, no dramatic speech, just quiet confidence. The judge closed the file. The Carter Family Trust is valid. Ownership has legally belonged to Emma Carter since the day the trust conditions were violated. He looked toward Margaret and Tyler. "You removed a widowed mother recovering from childbirth from the very home the trust was created to protect her in. The court finds no legal basis to overturn Mr. David Carter's wishes." The gavel struck. Case dismissed. In that single moment, the last hope Tyler and Margaret had disappeared. As people began leaving the courtroom, Tyler rushed toward Emma. "Please, I've lost everything." Emma looked at him with calm eyes. "No, you lost what you chose to lose. You lost a father who loved you. You lost a sister who would have given you everything. And you lost it because you believed kindness was weakness." Tyler lowered his head. For the first time in his life, no one came to rescue him. Margaret slowly walked over. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I don't deserve forgiveness." Emma nodded gently. "No, you don't." A tear rolled down Margaret's face. "But I hope one day you'll remember me for something other than the worst day of your life." Emma looked at the woman she had spent 31 years trying to please. Then she softly replied, "I already do. I remember the mother I kept hoping you would become, and today, I'm finally letting her go." Emma kissed Lily's forehead, turned around, and walked toward the courthouse steps. Outside, hundreds of volunteers and mothers from Lily House were waiting. The moment she stepped outside, they applauded, not because she had won a lawsuit, but because she had turned unimaginable pain into a place where no mother would ever hear the words, "Figure it out." Months later, the Carter family home had become the largest transitional home for single mothers in the state. Over 200 women and children had found safety there. Every nursery door carried a small silver plaque that read, "No mother or child will ever be turned away from this home." At the entrance hung one final frame. Inside it was a picture of David Carter holding a young Emma on his shoulders. Beneath the photograph were the words he wrote years before he died. "A house becomes a home only when the strongest person inside chooses love over fear." Emma smiled every time she walked past it, because she finally understood what her father had really left her. Not a deed, not a house, not money. He left her the chance to end a generation of favoritism, rejection, and pain. And she did. As the camera slowly pulled away from Lily House, children's laughter echoed across the yard. Mothers smiled on the porch flowers, bloomed where heartbreak once lived. Somewhere, Emma imagined her father watching, proud, peaceful, finally knowing that the little girl he fought so hard to protect had become the woman who would protect thousands more, because the greatest revenge was never making them homeless. It was proving that the daughter they treated as worthless became the woman the whole world stood up to honor. And in the end, the house never belonged to the people who lived inside it. It belonged to the heart that knew how to make everyone else feel at home.